I never thought a Monday morning could feel like Judgment Day. But there I was, heels clicking against the marble lobby floor of Redwood Global's Midtown Tower. Coffee trembling in my hand even though my grip was tight. The glass doors shimmered with the reflection of the city outside, yellow cabs darting. Horns blaring, 1,000 people chasing their hustle. On the surface, New York was just doing what it always does, move fast. Stay loud, keep going, but inside me, my heartbeat was a rhythm all its own, tight, tense, pounding like a drumline in my chest. 10 years I'd been climbing these same elevators, breathing the same recycled air, typing until my wrists ached. 10 years of building somebody else's empire. Brick by brick, spreadsheet by spreadsheet, while watching them collect the credit, the raises, the promotions that never had my name on them. My name, Ayanna, meant beautiful blossom in Swahili. My mama gave it to me with pride, telling me I'd bloom no matter where I was planted. But after 10 years in this tower, I didn't feel like a blossom. I felt like a shadow. The security guard, Mr. Thomas, gave me a small nod as I passed through. He always looked at me with a kind of fatherly sadness, like he knew I carried too much weight on my shoulders. "Morning, Ms. Ayanna," he said softly. I forced a smile. "Morning." Truth is, I wanted to tell him I was tired of giving everything and still being invisible. Tired of sacrificing pieces of myself for a company that couldn't even remember my birthday, let alone my worth. But in corporate America, especially as a black woman, you don't say you're tired. You smile, you stay sharp, you prove yourself twice as hard, just to get half as far. The elevator doors closed, sealing me in with 3 executives laughing about their weekend golf trip. They didn't look my way. They never did. I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls, hair laid, suit pressed, lips glossed just right. I looked the part, no doubt, but behind my eyes, there was fire, and maybe, just maybe, that fire was about to burn through the glass ceiling they kept pressing against me. When the doors opened on the 27th floor, I stepped out into the buzz of the office. Phones ringing, keyboards clattering, that smell of fresh paper mixed with burnt coffee and ambition. I walked past rows of desks, people hunched over screens like they were chained to them. And in the corner office, right by the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the skyline, sat Brandon. Brandon, my boss, my so-called mentor, the golden boy of Redwood Global. White, smooth-talking, always in his tailored suit with cufflinks that cost more than my rent. He knew how to charm a boardroom, how to smile for the cameras, how to sell himself as the visionary leader everyone should admire. But me? I'd seen the real him. The arrogance, the entitlement, the way he took my ideas and passed them off as his own, smiling like he'd just solved world hunger. I remembered last quarter's project. I stayed late every night for 3 weeks, eating takeout at my desk, missing my mama's doctor appointment, missing my nephew's school recital, all because Brandon said, "We need this polished if we're gonna win the client." I gave it everything, and when the presentation day came, he stood in front of the clients, reciting my words, my research, my late nights. He didn't even glance at me while they applauded him. And when the deal closed, he bought himself a new watch. I bought myself another cup of coffee to keep going. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself patience pays off, that eventually someone would notice. That's what Mama always said, keep your head down, do good work, and your blessings will find you. But Mama never had to survive corporate America, where blessings don't come without battles. That morning, I dropped my bag at my desk, opened my laptop, and my inbox lit up. A flood of unread emails. Meeting invites, urgent, tasks marked red. But one subject line stopped me cold. Project Phoenix, final team acknowledgement. Phoenix, the biggest project of the year. The one I had lived and breathed for months. I clicked it open, already picturing my name in bold print, finally visible for the work I'd done. But as my eyes scanned the list of acknowledgements, my name wasn't there. Not once. Not even in the fine print. It was Brandon's name at the top. Brandon's name in the press release attached. Brandon's smiling face on the draft announcement to go out to the entire company. My work, his glory, again. My chest tightened. I heard the whispers in my own head. They'll never see you. You'll always be the support. Never the star. You'll always be the worker. Never the leader. I pushed back from my desk. Stood up too fast. The chair scraping against the floor. A few heads turned. I forced my breathing steady. Forced my body calm. But inside, my soul was roaring. I walked to the restroom. Locking myself in a stall. The walls were thin, but it felt like the only place I could breathe. I leaned against the door. Closed my eyes. And in that quiet, I heard my grandma's voice. Like she was standing right there. Baby. Don't let nobody steal your worth. Tears burned, but I blinked them away. No, Brandon didn't get to win like this. He might have stolen my credit today. But this story wasn't finished. I straightened up, wiped my face, and looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes weren't just tired, they were fierce. The fire inside me had found oxygen. They think I'm invisible, I whispered to myself. They're about to find out otherwise. And with that, I walked back out into the storm of phones and keyboards. Heels clicking with a new rhythm. One that sounded less like survival and more like the beginning of war. The office hummed with its usual false calm. The kind of calm that felt like a mask stretched too tight over chaos. Phones rang in rhythmic bursts. Keyboards clicked like nervous teeth. And voices floated in low tones across cubicles. But for me, every sound was muffled, drowned under the weight pressing against my chest. That email still burned in my mind. My name erased. My work stolen. Again. I sat at my desk. Hands frozen over the keyboard. Watching my screen glow back at me like it had secrets I wasn't ready to face. The cursor blinked, almost taunting me. Invisible. 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 Morning. Ayanna. I looked up. It was Carla from accounting. Her coffee steaming in hand. She leaned against the partition of my cubicle. Her eyes soft but sharp. The kind of look only a black woman in corporate America could give another. The look that says, I see you. I know what you're carrying. You saw the email? I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. She just sipped her coffee. Lips pressed tight, then gave the smallest nod. Girl, we all saw it. Her words sank heavy. We all saw it. Which meant it wasn't just my humiliation, it was public. My erasure wasn't private anymore. Brandon hadn't just stolen from me. He'd announced to the entire company that my contributions didn't exist. Carla leaned closer. Keep your head. Don't let him see you sweat. I forced a smile, though my hands trembled. I'm fine. But I wasn't. At 10 a.m., the all-hands meeting began. We crowded into the glass conference room that overlooked the skyline. A view meant to inspire us, but that only reminded me of how small I felt. Brandon stood at the front, framed by the city like some chosen prophet. Suit sharp, smile polished. He looked like a magazine cover. And yet, the sight of him made my stomach turn. He clicked the remote, and the first slide flashed on the massive screen. Project Phoenix, a landmark success. My work, my research, my sleepless nights packaged into clean bullet points and graphs. Brandon cleared his throat, his voice smooth as butter. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for your dedication. Phoenix has been a resounding success. And it couldn't have happened without strong leadership. He paused, letting the word leadership hang in the air like perfume. Then he smiled that politician's smile, the one I'd come to hate. I'm humbled to have guided this project to victory. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Guided? He guided nothing. I was the one who built Phoenix from scratch. Brick by brick. And now here he was, standing in the glow of the spotlight I had lit. As he spoke, I caught the eyes of a few colleagues across the room. Some looked away quickly, uncomfortable. Others, like Carla, held my gaze. Their eyes filled with quiet solidarity. A whisper passed between us without words. We know the truth. But truth doesn't pay bills. Truth doesn't get promotions. In corporate America, perception is reality, and Brandon was the master of perception. After the meeting, people gathered around him, clapping his back, congratulating him. Brilliant job, Brandon. You really saved us. Couldn't have done it without you. I stood by the table, gathering my notebook slowly, steadying my breathing. If I opened my mouth right then, I knew the fire inside me would spill out raw, unfiltered, and in this world, a black woman's anger is never just anger. It's unprofessional. It's aggressive. It's the excuse they use to keep you out of the room. So I swallowed it down. For now. Ayanna. His voice cut through the chatter. Brandon was suddenly beside me. His hand on my shoulder. His smile wide enough for the whole room to see. Couldn't have done it without your support, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Soft enough to still feel like a dismissal. Support. That was the role he reduced me to. Not creator. Not strategist. Just support. I forced a polite laugh, though my insides boiled. Glad I could help. His grin widened. I'll need you to put in some extra hours this week. We've got another client lined up. And I'll need everything polished by Friday. You don't mind, right? The way he said it, it wasn't a question. It was an order, wrapped in fake courtesy. I looked at him, really looked at him. The tailored suit, the $1,000 watch, the gleaming cufflinks. He was every inch the image of success. The picture they plastered in annual reports to make investors swoon. But beneath the shine, I saw it. The cracks. The arrogance that made him sloppy. The entitlement that made him think I'd never fight back. I smiled, slow and steady. Of course, Brandon, anything for the team. The words tasted like poison. But I swallowed them anyway. Because right then, I made a decision. I wouldn't fight him in the open, not yet. I'd play the role, wear the mask, keep my fire hidden. But inside, a storm was brewing. That evening, as the office emptied and the city lights flickered on, I sat alone at my desk, staring at the skyline. My phone buzzed. A message from Mama. Baby, did you eat yet? I typed back quickly. Not yet. But I'm okay. Love you. I wasn't okay, but I would be, because I wasn't just fighting for me anymore. I was fighting for every birthday missed, every family dinner skipped, every black woman who'd ever been told to wait her turn. I packed my bag, heels echoing in the empty hallway. And as I stepped into the elevator, I whispered to myself. They think I'll stay quiet. But silence has never saved us. Not me, not my people, not anymore. The doors slid shut, and in that mirrored reflection, I didn't see a shadow anymore. I saw the beginning of a reckoning. The week dragged on like a sentence I hadn't agreed to serve. Brandon piled on, urgent, requests. Each task dressed up as opportunity. Each deadline tighter than the last. I moved like a ghost through the office, efficient, precise, invisible. To everyone else, it looked like I was functioning. But inside, I was unraveling thread by thread. It was Wednesday morning when the blow landed. I had barely settled at my desk, still nursing the first sip of bitter coffee, when the email popped up. Subject line: compensation adjustment notice. My stomach dropped. My finger hovered over the mouse. Frozen. Adjustments never meant good news. I clicked, and the words bled into my vision, effective immediately. Your base salary will be reduced by 40% due to departmental restructuring. 40%. I read it twice, 3 times, waiting for my brain to tell me I had misread. But the words were clear, blunt, merciless. 40% gone. Just like that. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. My chest tightened, breath shallow. All I could think of was Mama's medication. The stack of hospital bills waiting on the kitchen counter. My nephew's college fund I had been secretly adding to each month. Rent, groceries, life. How was I supposed to live with 40% of my lifeline cut away? A low ringing filled my ears, drowning out the office buzz. My hand gripped the edge of the desk so tight my knuckles went white. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to let every ounce of rage pour out. But I couldn't, because this wasn't just about me. Lord, I whispered under my breath, give me strength. Just then, Brandon appeared at the edge of my cubicle, like the devil summoned by my despair. He leaned against the partition, arms crossed, a grin playing on his lips. Tough news, huh? He said casually, as if my livelihood was just a headline in his morning paper. I forced myself to look at him. You did this? He shrugged. It was a leadership call. Times are tight. Budgets need trimming. Sacrifices have to be made. His cufflinks glinted under the fluorescent lights. mocking me. But your bonus went up, I said flatly. He smirked, not even bothering to deny it. Leadership has its perks. The audacity, the cruelty wrapped in charm. He wanted me to break right there, in front of him, to fold under the weight he'd piled on my back. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I stood, my heels clicking against the tile, my body trembling but my chin high. You think this breaks me? You don't even know what breaking looks like. He chuckled, low and smug. Careful, Ayanna, you don't want to get a reputation for being difficult. Difficult, that word again, the corporate code for every black woman who dares to demand more than crumbs. I didn't reply, I just grabbed my phone and walked past him. Out of the office, into the hallway, my vision blurred, tears pushing at the edges. I made it to the restroom, locking the stall behind me. The silence wrapped around me like a shroud. I sat on the closed toilet seat, phone in hand, and pulled up Mama's number. My thumb hovered over call. I wanted to hear her voice, to let her tell me it would be okay, to remind me of the faith she'd poured into me since I was a little girl. But I couldn't. I couldn't let her hear the crack in my voice. She had her own burdens, her health, her pain. I wasn't going to add mine to the list. Instead, I scrolled to the photo of her taped inside my phone case, Mama in her church hat. Smiling wide, her eyes full of light. She looked at me like she always had, like I was destined for more than this. And that's when something shifted. The tears dried, the tremble stilled, the fire inside me, the one I had been choking back for months, flared hotter. I whispered to the photo, to myself, they want to strip me down? I'll rebuild stronger. They think I'm powerless? They're about to see power they can't control. That afternoon, whispers started drifting my way. A colleague brushed by my desk, slipping a folded note into my hand. Inside, a copy of an internal budget spreadsheet, highlighting executive bonuses against department cuts. Numbers didn't lie. Later, Carla cornered me in the break room, her voice low. Girl, I know you hurting, but you're not alone. We all see what he's doing. She slid a small flash drive across the counter. Files, emails, backups. Keep it safe. I blinked, stunned. Why are you giving me this? Because one of us has to stand up, she said simply, and I think it's you. Her words landed heavy in my chest. I wasn't just carrying my own fight anymore, I was carrying theirs too. Every quiet nod in the hallway, every averted gaze in meetings, every whispered, that ain't right. They had been waiting for someone to step forward. And maybe, just maybe, that someone was me. That night, I stayed late, the office emptied around me. The hum of the air conditioner the only sound. I sat in the glow of my monitor. Files open, emails stacked, evidence unfolding piece by piece. Every click of the mouse was another truth unearthed. Every folder I copied was a memory of the nights they stole from me. As the clock crept past midnight, I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion tugging at me but adrenaline holding me upright. I thought about my grandmother's words again. Baby, don't let nobody steal your worth. Brandon had stolen my credit. He had stolen my salary. But my worth? That was mine, and I was about to make sure the whole world saw it. I closed my laptop, slid the flash drive into my purse, and stood. My heels echoed in the silent hallway like war drums. This wasn't survival anymore. This was the beginning of resistance. I used to think silence was protection. That if I kept my head down, worked twice as hard, and swallowed the sting of every microaggression, I could shield myself. But silence had become its own prison. And by the time autumn rolled in, New York skies washed in gray. The air heavy with rain and exhaust, I realized I was suffocating. The company's glow was dimming. Not just in quarterly numbers but in spirit. You could feel it when you walked the halls, eyes downcast. Voices hushed. Laughter that used to brighten lunch breaks now strangled into nervous smiles. Brandon's shadow stretched long. He wasn't just mismanaging projects anymore, he was crushing people. For me, the breaking point came one Friday evening. I had stayed late, again. The office was near empty. Just the cleaning staff moving quietly, their vacuums humming like a low lament. My desk lamp cast a small circle of light on a pile of reports I'd been buried under. My phone buzzed with a text from my niece, Auntie Yana. You still coming to my recital? Starts in 20 minutes. I froze. My chest tightened. I had promised her. She was only 8, her first solo performance on stage. And there I was, trapped under fluorescent lights, chained by Brandon's impossible deadlines. I looked at the time. If I left that second, I might have made it halfway through her piece. But Brandon had reminded me earlier that missing deliverables could reflect poorly during evaluation season. He said it with that smug smile, the kind that carried both threat and delight. I stared at the clock, then back at my niece's text. Tears welled before I even realized. For the first time in my career, the weight of this job felt heavier than the value it claimed to bring. I typed back, hands shaking. I'm so sorry. Baby, break a leg. I'll watch the video later. And then, in that quiet, I broke. I put my head down on the desk, the tears spilling out, hot and relentless. Years of holding it together, of smiling when dismissed, of staying small so I wouldn't be too much. It all cracked open. That's when I heard the footsteps. Soft, hesitant, I lifted my head, wiped my face quickly, and saw Layla, one of the few other black women in the department. She was younger, maybe mid-20s, still new enough to carry hope but already tired in her eyes. She held a stack of files against her chest like armor. You okay, Ms. Ayanna? She asked gently. I forced a smile. Yeah, just allergies. She studied me for a moment, not buying it. Then she said something that pierced deeper than Brandon's threats ever could. Don't let them steal your light. We need you. My throat tightened. We need you. I wanted to tell her I was just as broken, just as lost, but instead, I nodded, managing a whisper. Thank you. She left me standing in that dim office with a truth I couldn't shake. This wasn't just about me anymore. Every time I let Brandon's abuse slide, I was teaching people like Layla that this was survival, that silence was the only path. But silence wasn't saving us. It was killing us. The following week, Brandon called a leadership sync. His words, not mine. We filed into the glass conference room. The city skyline spread behind him like he owned it. He stood tall, voice booming, throwing around buzzwords like confetti, synergy, operational excellence, tightening belts. Then came the bomb. We'll need to make some tough adjustments. For now, senior managers will take a pay cut of 57%. Non-negotiable. The room erupted. Some gasped. Others cursed under their breath. I felt the blood drain from my face. 57%? That wasn't a haircut. That was amputation. Brandon raised his hands like a preacher calming a restless congregation. It's temporary. A necessary sacrifice for the greater good. I, too, am affected. But we all knew the truth. He'd already lined his pockets. We'd seen his new watch. His weekend getaways. His sacrifice was a performance. Ours was survival. One colleague, a father of 3, whispered, "This'll cost me my house." Another muttered, "He's lying. Watch him leave with a bonus." And me? I sat still, the rage boiling so hot it felt like fire in my veins. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind, "Baby, injustice will test your spirit. But remember, you were not born to bow." Brandon locked eyes with me as he spoke his final line, "We're all in this together." I smiled, tight, controlled, but hiding a storm. "No, Brandon," I thought, "we are not in this together. Not anymore." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, the city sounds drifting through my window, sirens, car horns, distant music. My mind replayed everything. My niece's recital, Lila's eyes, Brandon's smug grin. I thought about my ancestors. About generations who bore heavier chains than corporate politics, yet still carved out dignity, hope, and resilience. And I realized I had reached my breaking point. But breaking didn't mean I was done. Breaking meant I was ready to rebuild, on my terms. I sat up in bed, opened my laptop, and began typing. Not a resignation letter. Not yet. Something different. Evidence. Documentation. A record of every lie. Every manipulation. Every shadow Brandon had cast over us. My fingers flew across the keys like fire catching dry wood. This wasn't just a diary. It was ammunition. By dawn, I closed the laptop, exhaustion pulling at me, but with clarity I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't silence anymore. This was war. I didn't walk into that boardroom empty-handed. I walked in carrying years of receipts, emails, financial reports, audit trails Brandon thought he buried under jargon and intimidation. But more than that, I carried the weight of every late night, every sacrificed family moment, every younger colleague who whispered, "We need you." It was early morning when I stepped into the glass-walled room on the 42nd floor. The city stretched out behind me, sunlight bouncing off towers like spotlights on a stage. My heels clicked against polished floors with a rhythm steady as a drumbeat. This wasn't just another meeting. This was the showdown. Brandon was already there, leaning back in his leather chair, cufflinks glinting, confidence dripping off him like cologne. Around the long mahogany table sat the board, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, tired of excuses but still skeptical of me. He smiled, that same smug grin. "Ayanna, glad you could join us. Let's make this quick." I didn't sit. I placed a thick folder on the table, its thud echoing like a gavel striking wood. "This won't be quick," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried. Every pair of eyes turned to me. Because what's at stake here isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's integrity. It's people's lives. Brandon chuckled, dramatic as always. "Let's stick to the agenda." I opened the folder. Pages spread like wings across the table, highlighted financial inconsistencies, discrepancies in vendor contracts, emails where Brandon approved shady transfers. I had them all. "This is the agenda," I replied, locking eyes with the chairwoman. Millions siphoned under false pretenses. Salaries cut under the guise of sacrifice while executive accounts swelled. This isn't leadership. It's theft, plain and simple. The room fell silent. Brandon's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, voice low and sharp. "Be very careful, Ayanna." For a moment, the old fear crept in, the weight of being the only black woman in the room. The double bind of speaking truth and being labeled angry. But I heard my grandmother's words in my chest, "Baby, don't let nobody steal your worth." I straightened. "No, Brandon, you should be careful, because the truth doesn't need my permission to come out." As if on cue, the doors opened, cameras clicked, reporters filed in, notebooks ready, lenses aimed. The board had invited the press. My evidence wasn't just going to be discussed in whispers, it was about to be broadcast. Brandon paled. He hadn't seen that coming. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, turning to the cameras. "For months, employees at this company have been told to sacrifice for survival. We missed birthdays. We lost homes. Some even faced medical bills they couldn't cover, all while our leader here cashed in. Today, the truth speaks louder than his lies." The flashbulbs lit up the room. Brandon shifted, sweat collecting at his temples. "You have no proof this is criminal," he barked. I slid one final page across the table, an auditor's signed report from Zurich. The very one Brandon thought he destroyed. The chairwoman picked it up, her eyes narrowing as she read. Murmurs rippled through the board. Brandon's mask cracked, his voice rose, desperate. "This is a witch hunt. She's twisting numbers, manipulating." But the cameras caught every stutter, every bead of sweat, every slip of his composure. And me? I stayed steady, my voice carrying like gospel. "No manipulation, just truth, and the truth will always outlive a lie." The board conferred in hushed tones. But the reporters were already sending updates, their fingers flying over keyboards. Brandon's empire of intimidation was crumbling in real time. I looked around the room, at Layla standing near the back, at colleagues who had once bowed their heads now lifting them with cautious hope. And I realized this wasn't just my fight anymore. It was ours. The chairwoman finally spoke, her tone measured but firm. "Mr. Brandon, pending further investigation, you are suspended effective immediately." Gasps filled the room. Brandon stood, face red, pointing at me. "This isn't over." I met his fury with calm. "You're right, it's not. Because accountability doesn't end when one man falls. It begins when a system changes." The cameras caught that line. And for once, I didn't flinch. I owned it. As Brandon stormed out, reporters swarmed me, their voices overlapping. How long did you know? What happens next? Why risk your career? I took a breath, my pulse steady, because silence was costing us more than fear. And because black women don't break, we rise. Always. The room erupted, flashes, voices, momentum shifting like a tide. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just my revenge. This was justice. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do in the workplace is refuse to stay silent. Integrity might cost you comfort, but it buys you freedom. Right finger if you believe in standing tall against injustice, like this video. Share it with someone who needs courage. And drop your story in the comments. Let's rise together. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days straight. New York felt heavy, like the sky itself was carrying secrets it was ready to pour out. That morning, as I buttoned my blazer and slipped on my heels, I knew this wasn't just another meeting. This was the execution ground. Brandon just didn't know it yet. When I stepped into Redwood Tower, the marble lobby echoed with every click of my steps. Employees' eyes followed me, some with quiet hope, some with fear. They had seen the headlines, the leaked memos, the whistleblower documents. The storm was already here. The special board meeting was just the lightning strike. The elevator ride up was silent except for my own breath, steady but sharp, like I was holding the rhythm of a drumline in my chest. Floor 39. Doors slid open, a sea of suits, cameras outside the boardroom glass. Reporters pressed against the barricade, their flashes like a storm of fireflies. I walked in. The board sat in a perfect crescent at the polished oak table. 12 men and women in power suits, faces unreadable. At the far end, Brandon leaned back in his chair, tie knotted too tight, eyes darting like a cornered fox. He had aged in just a week, skin drawn, arrogance dimmed, but I knew him. He would fight, even when the war was already lost. Ms. Cole, the chairwoman said, voice clipped, you may begin. I didn't bring theatrics, just a black folder. Inside it, every receipt, every email, every dollar that went missing under Brandon's reign. I laid them out one by one, like cards in a final hand of poker. Let me be clear, I said, my voice low but carrying through the room. This isn't personal. This is about Redwood. This is about every employee who was silenced. Every contract buried, every law broken under Brandon Hale's leadership. Brandon shot up, palms slamming the table. This is slander. You're nothing but a bitter employee trying to climb over me. But before he could finish, the chairwoman raised her hand. Behind me, the doors opened, and 2 attorneys walked in. Not mine, the board's. That was the moment Brandon's mask cracked. His jaw twitched, sweat sliding down his temple. One by one, the board members turned, and one by one, they spoke. We can't afford his liability. He's compromised our reputation. He's unfit to serve. Each sentence was another nail in his corporate coffin. Finally, the chairwoman's gavel struck, effective immediately. Brandon Hale is removed from his position as CEO of Redwood Global. Security, escort him out. The room held its breath. Brandon's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Cameras outside the glass caught everything. The fall of a man who once thought himself untouchable. As he was led past me, his eyes met mine. For the first time, there was no arrogance, just a hollow recognition that the empire he built on lies had finally crumbled. I didn't gloat, didn't smile. I simply gathered my folder and said, this wasn't revenge, this was accountability. The boardroom went silent. Outside, the press roared. The boardroom emptied like a tide retreating from the shore, leaving echoes of authority and whispers of relief in its wake. I stood alone for a moment, hands resting on the polished oak table, listening to the faint hum of the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the sun was breaking through the clouds. The rain from days past had left the streets gleaming, reflecting the skyscrapers like mirrors of possibility. I didn't hear the applause, didn't notice the subtle nods of approval from some board members. What I felt was a quiet, grounding sense of purpose, a reminder that this was never about me. It was about justice, integrity, and the people who had been overshadowed by Brandon's deceit for far too long. Walking down the hallway, I felt eyes on me. Employees peeking from cubicles, some smiling, some hesitant. I caught the eye of a young analyst, barely out of college, trembling as he clutched his notebook. I nodded, just a small gesture, but it said everything. You're not alone. You belong. You have a voice. Back at my office, I sat down, letting the adrenaline fade into quiet reflection. Brandon's downfall had made headlines. I knew the story would be dissected on every financial blog and news outlet. But this wasn't about fame. It was about accountability, about showing everyone, especially women of color like me, that the system can bend. But it doesn't have to break us. I opened my laptop and typed a message to the team. Today, we proved that integrity matters. Tomorrow, we rebuild, not just the company, but the culture. Let's lead with transparency, respect, and courage. I paused, letting the weight of those words settle. That was the real victory. Not the media attention, not the exposure of a corrupt CEO, but the affirmation that truth, resilience, and persistence could shift the tide. Later that evening, I walked onto the balcony, the city lights shimmering like stars scattered across the skyline. I thought about all the people who had doubted me, the ones who whispered behind closed doors, the faces that tried to intimidate me into silence. And yet, here I was, still standing, still speaking, still moving forward. I realized that leadership wasn't about holding power, it was about empowering others. It was about using your voice to protect the vulnerable, challenge the unjust, and inspire change. And in that realization, I found a calm, unshakable strength. Because the storm may come, people may fall, systems may fail, but character, integrity, those are unshakable. True power is not in revenge, it's in the courage to uphold truth. Even when it's uncomfortable, integrity inspires others, builds trust, and leaves a legacy far stronger than titles or money ever could. Right finger like if you believe in standing up for what's right. Right finger share to empower those who feel unheard. Right finger comment your story. Let's inspire each other to rise above injustice.